Hello everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra and see if this particular Samsung Galaxy is still worth buying in 2024. Now, the first thing I would definitely tell you is that I think the Galaxy S21 Ultra is still a very good phone. This was a very good phone when Samsung first released it back in 2021, and I still think it's a very good device for the most part. It's not perfect, but I do think it completely gets the job done from the bare necessities of a phone that you need in 2024. It looks very good, has amazing build quality, still supported with software. It's a, very good phone to buy for the duration of 2024, but there may be some things that I'm not that big of a fan of looking forward past this year. So we'll talk about that throughout this video. If you want to buy the S21 Ultra or some phones I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the Galaxy S21 Ultra, on the front of this phone, we have a 6.8-inch dynamic AMOLED display. It's a 1440p panel, and without a doubt, it is definitely probably one of the best displays Samsung has made up until this point from 2021. I think it's a very good panel for sure. Clearly, the S24 Ultra is definitely a better panel, but the S21 Ultra back in 2021 was the best panel they made, I think. It got 1500 nits of brightness, very large display, fairly good, resolution, and 120 Hz. It had everything you'd ever want, and it was one of the last S21 Ultras or last Ultra phones to kind of look like this. Since then, they've completely changed the design, and they changed it again, but this phone looked very good, and I was a massive fan of the S21 Ultra back in 2021, and it really still looks very good for this day and age. And the hole punch display as well, very good looking phone. Now you are getting that USB Type-C port on the bottom, which is great. No micro SD card slot, nothing like that. But you did have S Pen capability with this, with this phone, which is a very cool thing. Unfortunately, you had to carry the S Pen separately, which was kind of annoying. You couldn't just go through and just plug in the S Pen on this phone. So that was kind of like an annoying thing going on for this phone. Not the end of the world or anything, but if you were wanting a device where you could go ahead and kind of plug this thing in wirelessly or have it plugged into the device, unfortunately this was not one of those devices, but again, it's not that big of a deal. On the back side, you were getting your frosted glass back. So this was another really cool advantage for this type of device because you could just go ahead and have this frosted glass back on this device that looked very good, that felt very good. And those are some really cool things going on for this type of phone because you could just go ahead and just have a phone that still feels so premium so many years later. And this was one of the first Samsung phones to bring a frosted glass back. The S21 Plus series in general had the first plastic and glass back, but this phone for the Ultra lineup was a very big deal in my opinion, and that in and of itself was a very cool thing going on for this particular device. So when I look back at the S21 Ultra, the camera setup on the back was massive. The frosted glass back was amazing. It was a big phone. It's definitely one of my favorite phones going on, even in this specific year because of its price tag. This phone has gone down in price so much. The fact that you can probably buy this thing on Amazon for like less than $350 right now is insane. This was like a $1,300 phone back in like 2021. This phone has gone down in value so much, and it's still completely a good phone for the most part. That's something that's really cool about these devices. Funny enough, these phones also had some of the best chipsets as well, so because of that, you were still getting really good battery life from something like the S21 Ultra. At a smaller scale, I just compared my S21 against the S24s and all these other phones, and my Galaxy S21 actually outperformed my S22 and my Galaxy S20 for my battery life. So the S21 Ultra should also outperform those phones as well, and then some, because it does have a much better, bigger size battery, and that chipset inside was also very optimized. So from those things, the S21 Ultra is a very good phone, and I love this phone a lot from that particular perspective. Now, on the camera side of things, this was also another very fascinating thing about this phone. So you were getting a 108 megapixel wide-angle lens, a periscope telephoto lens, a 10 megapixel telephoto lens, and then a 12 megapixel ultra-wide camera. Now, the very cool thing about this phone was that on the back side, it was a very crazy good camera at that time, and it basically had everything you'd ever want from a phone, basically firing on all cylinders. On the front side, you were getting a 40 megapixel wide-angle lens. Now you could do 4K at 60 on the front, 8K capability on the back, and just those things in and of itself are very cool things going on for this particular phone. Just imagine having a phone of this caliber, in that day and age, that was giving you that type of capability for the most part. That's a very cool thing going on for this phone. And when I look back at the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra, back in 2021, it was a very good camera. The only thing going on in this day and age is that with some of these cameras, they're really not as crazy good as they used to be, when looking back. And I would say the worst thing going on for these cameras now is that they're not as optimized in terms of the social media applications as the newer Android phones are. We just heard with the Galaxy S24 keynote that Samsung teamed up with those social media apps to basically bring us higher quality, basically the same image quality in the camera app as the, social media app. Hopefully that's the case. I still have to test it a little bit further, but that is kind of an advantage, I would say, going on for the newer phones. But beyond that, if you don't really care about that kind of stuff, or if you can port over your, photos or videos from your, camera app to your social media app, I definitely do think a phone like the S21 Ultra's camera is still very, very good. And I think that's a very cool thing going on for that particular device. Now, moving on to the software longevity, this is probably one of the biggest disadvantages, I would say, for the S21 Ultra. On a vast majority at like a large scale, usually Samsung phones do really well from a software standpoint for, an Android device, but they've gotten way better in this day and age. The S24, Samsung knocked it out of the park, giving us basically the same length of years of software updates as a Google Pixel and as an iPhone. So there's like not that big of a difference between these phones anymore. There's not really a stereotype of Samsung's not lasting as long as iPhones anymore. And that's insane. That has narrowed the gap between those devices anymore. However, you cannot say that about this phone and any phone really before the S24. Those phones are giving you a couple years of software updates, but for the length of time in 2024, this phone is still going to be perfectly fine. You're on Android 14 on this thing, so you're really not going to be missing out on too much, to be honest. I don't know if this thing's going to be getting Android 15. The Galaxy S20 got unsupported with software on Android 13, so I don't know if this phone's still going to be supported on the next version. So we're pretty much just going to have to wait and out and kind of see what happens. But I'm pretty sure with the Galaxy S21 Ultra, this phone is going to be perfectly fine for this day and age. You're going to be perfectly okay, and I don't think it's really that big of a deal. But keep in mind, if you're wanting a phone that is going to be supported for the next year or two, probably with the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra and above, those are the ones that you probably want to look out for. But it's weird because, if you just want to get a longer lasting phone, you have to buy the newest phone. But this phone from every other standpoint is still perfectly fine, including the performance. This is probably one of the more interesting things going on for this phone. And every time I pick up a phone that has these, chipsets, it's still insane. The S21 Ultra had that Snapdragon 888 chipset inside with 12 gigabytes of RAM on the base models, and it goes up to 16 gigs. The last Ultra phone had 8 gigs of RAM starting, that went up to 12. Now we have 12 gigabytes of RAM on the S21 Ultra or S24 Ultra, and this phone had a 16 gigabyte of RAM option back in 2021. This was a very good performing phone with a lot of RAM back in the day, which was insane. And I love having this type of phone with that type of capability because it's so awesome. From all the games and everything that you're basically going to be, playing with on this particular device, you're going to be having a very good performing phone from this thing. There's not really a lot to complain about, and I think that's a very cool thing. When you're buying a phone like this, you're really not going to have a lot of things to complain about from a performance standpoint. And I think that's a really cool thing going on for this particular device. You're going to be getting a very fast phone, and with that 120 Hz, things are going to be feeling very, very fast. I've seen a lot of Android gaming handhelds that have this chipset inside as well, and those things, the fact that you have that chipset inside of this device is insane. And I use the S21 quite a bit for a lot of gaming and a lot of, chipsets that, from that year, like in 2021, with that 888 chipset were very good. And in my opinion, this is a very good, device from a performance standpoint. And to kind of round out in some of my, thesis on this particular, video, I think the S21 Ultra is a very good phone to buy. I think it's still completely worth buying in 2024. And the hardware will pretty much outlast the software here, which is kind of sad, but it's still a very good phone and I'm a massive fan of it. But if you want to, I'd recommend going to the S22 Ultra, the S23 Ultra. The newer phones are definitely better. And if you can swing for the S24 Ultra, I'd recommend buying that one. But if not, I think the S21 Ultra is still a very good phone to buy. And I think it's a very, very beautiful device when it comes down to it. So that pretty much covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.